Melmoth the Wanderer, Stories Within Stories, Part 2. Yes, I laugh at all mankind, and the imposition that they dare to practice when they talk of hearts. I laugh at human passions and human cares, vice and virtue, religion and impiety. They are all the result of petty localities and artificial situation. In the first part of this two-part series, we covered the significance of Melmoth the Wanderer in Gothic literature. So, if you haven't already, pause right now and go give that episode a watch. For everyone else, in part 2, we'll look from a bird's eye view at the stories that form Charles Maturin's Melmoth the Wanderer. I'm your host, Bob. Now please, sit back and enjoy today's edition of Lit Tips. The tales in the novel are not told in any specific order. Instead, they jump around with as little explanation as the Wanderer himself. They include the manuscript left by Stanton, the tale of the Spaniard, the tale of the Indian, the tale of the Guzman family, and the lover's tale. Stanton's story begins as he witnesses two lovers struck by lightning, and sees a man laughing who happens to be Melmoth. After hearing this same Melmoth was the uninvited guest of a wedding where the bride died and the groom descended into madness, it would only foreshadow Stanton's own committal to a madhouse as his obsession with Melmoth intensified. In his time of need, Melmoth shows up and offers to free Stanton for a price. Stanton refuses. The next story is told by a survivor of a shipwreck, the tale of the Spaniard. After burning Melmoth's portrait, John is visited by him in a dream. The next day, John sees Melmoth looking off the cliff at a shipwreck. John falls into the water and is saved by the Spanish shipwreck survivor Moncada, who stays with John as he recovers. As he tells his story, we find that he is of royal origins but fled his native Spain as he was forced into a monastery by his family. He struggled for years, and as he unveils his story, it's revealed he escaped and took refuge with an old Jewish man named Adonijah, who compels him to translate a manuscript as he waits. That manuscript is the next story, the tale of the Indian. Natives to neighboring islands in the Indian Ocean believe a god named Emily haunts an island. However, when Melmoth visits the island, it's revealed that the god is none other than a shipwrecked Spanish girl. Melmoth tries to corrupt her, but instead she falls in love with him. When she is eventually rescued and restored to Spain, she assumes a new Christian name, Isadora. She is homesick of her island, free of the woes of humanity and the binding irons of Christianity. Melmoth tracks her down and they eventually elope in an unholy wedding where she is later impregnated by Melmoth. Meanwhile, another story transpires from Isadora's father, a wealthy Spanish merchant returning from a years-long journey. He is visited by a stranger who tells him the tale of the Guzman family. The tale begins with a wealthy Spanish merchant, much like Isadora's father. He has a sister who marries a Protestant German musician, Walberg, and just before you get overly excited, it's not that Walberg. Anyway, they have 4 children and one day they are treated with news that they are to inherit her dying brother's fortunes. And they enjoy the riches for some time, even relocating Walberg's parents to Spain. When news comes that priests were able to get the dying merchant to leave his fortunes to the church instead, they are left with nothing in a foreign land, starving and with no one to help them because they don't share the same religion or language. Again, Melmoth shows, but Walberg, in his lowest form, and it is lower than low, still refuses Melmoth, and eventually, his fortune is restored. The stranger telling the Spanish merchant the tale abruptly dies, but is replaced by Melmoth himself, who accompanies the merchant on his trip home. The whole time the merchant not knowing that this stranger is in fact his son-in-law. The merchant, not knowing Isadora was married, was bringing news of an esteemed man she was to wed. In the meantime, Melmoth tells him the lover's tale, which is about a royal Yorkshire woman who was jilted at the altar due to a lie that destroyed the life of her and her to-be husband. When Melmoth visits her, again he is fended off, this time by luck of someone who recognized him and knew his true origins. Eventually the tale of the Indian comes back around, resulting in the death of Isadora's brother, Isadora herself being cast into the dungeons of the Inquisition, and giving birth to Melmoth's unholy child. As she loses her mind, her child dies in her arms and she dies soon after of despair. But before she does, Melmoth, her husband, visits her and offers her his hand to leave and be like him. She refuses him and dies. His targets are left to make a particularly dangerous decision under the most extreme of circumstances. Accept Melmoth's help and trade him places in his pact with the devil, or face certain doom. Ultimately, every single person Melmoth tries to sway defies Melmoth and, by association, a deal with the devil. This would mean, as Maturin would almost certainly have meant, that the human soul knows no bounds, can take on whatever sorrows and woes, no matter how horrible they are, and if they hold out for the sake of truth and decency, they will be saved in the end. The only one to suffer eternal damnation is Melmoth, as the enemy of mankind is not successful in tempting one soul. Despite his batting average, Melmoth will still remain one of the most horrifying figures in all of Gothic literature, and he's gone on to inspire classic horror figures as well as references in countless pieces of the Western canon. In the end, Melmoth says, "I have traversed the world in this search, and no one to gain that world would lose his own soul." We hope that you enjoyed this edition of Lit Tips. As always, hit that like button if you like what we're doing, subscribe for more videos on literature from your favorites to the plain obscure, hit that bell if you want to be notified when videos drop, and leave a comment with your thoughts on this video along with suggestions for any books or authors you would like us to cover in future episodes. Until next time, keep reading.